Heartworm hits like a truck with its themes of death, grief, self-loathing, and straight-up depression. It's not a game that I'd even call scary, but rather existential. Obviously, when we get existential, it tends to feel scary, so maybe the right way to put it is that it's scary, but not in the in-your-face kind of way that we're used to with a lot of horror games. In many ways, Heartworm wears its inspirations on its sleeve, being more Silent Hill than Resident Evil, mostly. But before I get ahead of myself, we should go over the gist of the game first. In Heartworm, you play as Sam, a grieving young woman who found herself searching for answers about the afterlife on various internet forums. One day, she comes across a forum that mentions an abandoned house that people can go to and find a door to the other side. But people who go supposedly never return. Stricken with grief from the loss of her grandfather, and just in a very rough spot in her life in general, Sam dives headfirst into this rumor and seeks the door that will supposedly answer all of her questions about what lies beyond death, only to get more than she bargained for.
It's spooky.
So yeah, a very cheery game that I put on Disney Plus immediately right between The Incredibles and the live action Lilo and Stitch. But seriously though, I wasn't being hyperbolic when I said the game hits like a truck, emotionally speaking. I'd even go so far as to say that you should make sure you're in a good enough headspace when playing the game. But of course, that's just me saying it. Your results may vary. I loved Sam as a character because she wasn't depressed for being depressed's sake. You know the type of character I mean. Overly negative, snarky, brood, one singular emotion all the time to the point where they feel more like a caricature of depression than the actual portrayal of what depression can look like. No, Sam is actually fairly complicated as a character in the exact same way somebody would be in real life after a major loss in their life. She has her fair share of jokes here and there that I'd imagine are delivered dryly, but they are jokes nonetheless when she interacts with some objects in the world, and even when she's expressing her own sadness. You're not beaten over the head with it, is what I'm trying to say. You're very much in a position where if you were standing next to her, you wouldn't know what to say except, damn, or just straight up silence. The reason I said I'd imagine some lines are delivered dryly is because the game predominantly has her silent unless there's a cutscene going on. When there's a cutscene, it's fully voiced. Otherwise, you're just reading text. Now, without getting too deep into the narrative itself, I'll just say that if you're familiar with Silent Hill in general, and how those narratives like to psychoanalyze the protagonist and their backgrounds, then you'll know what Heartworm is aiming for out of the gate. I should also mention that the game has multiple endings as well. I got the normal / bad ending, however you want to call it, because I didn't get a specific item I needed to get the good ending. I checked a guide when I was nearing the end of the game. I just needed to beat the final boss at that point. And it turns out the item I needed to find to get the good ending was in an area in the final zone of the game that I could no longer access because I beat that area and I couldn't go back for narrative reasons that I'm not going to spoil. Well, why didn't you go back to an earlier save, Daryl, once you realized that? That's the thing I tried. But because the game only has 5 save slots, and I saved in a new slot each time I made significant progress, my last save was just after I finished that area. So yeah, that sucks. And at the time of writing this script, I was salty about it. And now that I'm reading this part of the script again, I am now salty again about it. Now there's a whole portion right here that I wrote out in my script. I'm just going to zoom you out for a moment and tell you that, where I'm just ranting about how I don't personally like it when games lock true endings behind a missable item. But at the same time, the item wasn't that missable. I'll just say that much. I could see the item in question. It's just that for some reason, the game's collision wouldn't let me go where I needed to go. And I had to reuse a mechanic from the beginning of the game that I didn't have to use for hours on end. And I had to somehow remember to use that, but it was so dark and this and the other. So ultimately, my fault. But that doesn't change the fact that I don't really like when endings are blocked off because you didn't pick up the specific thing. So here is the normal / bad ending. Oh well. But that's me at the end of the day. Was the bad ending that I got even that bad? I'll be real. No. Thematically, it was still very fitting, and that's something I still enjoyed about that ending overall. But I rambled long enough about the story. Let's talk about the gameplay. The game plays like you'd expect from a retro-styled survival horror title. It borrows more from Resident Evil in that regard than Silent Hill, though. If I had to break it down, I'd say that the combat, some puzzles, and inventory management is very Resident Evil, while map navigation, other puzzles, and narrative are very in line with what you'd expect from Silent Hill. You only have 6 inventory slots and 1 ammo type. There are camera mods you can get for your camera, but I never managed to get any myself, but that's probably because I didn't finish some of the optional puzzles that are in the game, so I didn't get any extra goodies. Whoops. You get plenty of healing items that you can combine into better healing items like you would in Resident Evil. By the end of the game, I had an abundance of healing items, but that's also because I wasn't super aggressive with combat. Much like in other survival horror games that I play, both indie and AAA and everything in between, I tend to avoid fighting as much as I can unless the game incentivizes it somehow. And in this game, enemies do not drop anything when they die, so I am not incentivized to waste resources on that. Also, just level design and world design wise, you have a lot of room to maneuver around enemies. In fact, if an enemy wants to actually get you, some of them have an ability to just slow you down so that they can catch up to you. So they are still a threat, but if you give them a wide enough berth, you'll be fine. Before you even start the game, however, you can tweak your gameplay experience in a few different ways that don't change much of how the game plays, but more so how you would like to play the game. You can use the modern graphics style if you don't want that pixelation effect on the screen and instead just want to look at low poly models, or you can leave it as it is, which gives you the more retro pixelated look to it. You can use tank controls or more modern controls. You can have aiming the camera feel more like OG Resident Evil 4, where it's over the shoulder but you can't move, or more like old Resident Evil games, where the perspective doesn't shift when aiming, but you can still turn to aim your character, and still not move. Not being able to move is part of where the challenge of combat comes from, since you need to position yourself well. English is hard. Enemies generally don't move very fast, but there are a decent variety of them, so the same tricks won't always work. Enemies are also generally pretty tanky as well, taking about 5 to 8 snaps of the camera to kill them. So, as the game suggests, pick and choose your battles, and only kill for rooms where you'll know you'll be traveling through there a lot, or you'll just be in there for a while. Boss fights aren't difficult at all, and are, quite frankly, easy to handle, with only the first boss actually giving me a bit of trouble. Other than that, I hadn't died once in this game. And as I said earlier, the game loves throwing healing items at you, so I never really felt like I was in any danger. That said, I don't think making the game difficult would have been the point here. Heck, even the older Resident Evil and Silent Hill games weren't particularly difficult in the combat department. That's where the puzzles typically make up for that, but that's just my opinion. Before I wrap up this review, I just want to give a quick shout out to the game's phenomenal soundtrack. Like, for real, just listen to the boss theme for the first boss. The title of it is a spoiler, so yes, the first boss is a spider. Is there an arachnophobia setting in the game? Yes, there is. But just listen to this real quick, and you'll know why I'm like, yo, this soundtrack, I needed to buy it immediately.
This right here is my favorite thing ever in the history of forever. I think about this every day. I think about this all night long. I stay awake not sleeping because I'm thinking about this.
Heartworm is a beautifully macabre game that starts very heavy and depressing, but as you play, you see that there's more to it than just that. Heartworm is a very obvious go for it for me, and you can pick it up on PC for $15. It's well worth the price, believe me on that. And with that, there is one more game I want to talk about that'll be popping up next week for the end of spook season before I return to my every other Wednesday upload schedule. This was really fun to do though, and I might do something like this again next year, maybe for October, maybe for something else, who knows. So I hope you've enjoyed your stay. I'm TUSReview, and I'll catch you guys later.